The current finals matchup is the first time the world has ever seen the same two teams compete in the finals 3 years in a row. But there have been a few occasions where the same two teams have competed 2 years in a row, more commonly known as a finals rematch. There's a group of people out there that would call a finals rematch boring. The idea being that we've already seen these two compete, let's see some other teams. But I'm in the other group of people, which I think may be the majority. I love to see finals rematches. It gives the winning team a chance to prove their victory was no fluke, and gives the losing team a chance for a little revenge. Another shot at winning it all from the very team that had already beaten them. Finals rematches make for some of the most intense moments in basketball. Similar to my Game 7 video, I would like to feature all the rematches in NBA history, but I made the decision that it would be more relevant just to feature all the rematches from 1980, so let's get to it. The most recent finals rematch is the one on everyone's mind right now. It occurred in 2016 and was of course between Cleveland and Golden State. I already made a video featuring these matches in detail, so I won't spend too much time on it here. But Golden State had won the year before, and it was Cleveland's chance to win their first NBA championship, and LeBron wanted to be the one to help them win it. The original matchup in 2015 went to 6 games before Golden State took the championship. But there were several differences going into the rematch. Cleveland won an additional 4 games in the season, where Golden State won an additional 6, which set a record, by the way. The key players were all the same, but Steph Curry was overall improved from the previous year. But Golden State had an additional 2 playoff losses in the earlier rounds as compared to last year. The series lasted 7 games this time, and Cleveland came out on top. After a disappointing loss the previous year, the Cavaliers came back to win it all. The next rematch took place in 2014 and was between Miami and San Antonio. The winner of the first matchup was Miami, but they didn't win it by much. The 2013 series went to 7 games. Game 6 was won by a single possession, and the Game 7 margin of victory wasn't much higher. Going into the next season, it was looking like the Spurs might be the mightier team. Last year in the season, Miami had an additional 8 wins compared to the Spurs. This year, they had 8 fewer. Miami had the famous Big Three, but the Spurs had their Big Three in addition to another key player. The series was tied after the first 2 games, but the Spurs won 3 straight to take the series. The Spurs played perfectly as a team, where Miami was heavily reliant on one player. LeBron led his team in points, rebounds, assists, and steals. And the second closest player in most of these categories wasn't even that close. The Spurs, on the other hand, had multiple players all playing big roles. They had 5 scorers in double digits, with no player scoring above 20 per game. This 2014 series is a perfect example of the phrase, players win games, teams win championships. After a disappointing loss in the previous year, the Spurs came back to win it all. We have to go back a little further to find our next finals rematch. It was in 1998 between Chicago and Utah. The Bulls won the first matchup in 6 games, but no one was surprised. The Jazz did have a great team, led by Karl Malone and John Stockton, but it was the 1997 Bulls, and that's a hard opponent. In 1996, they set the season win record and won the championship, and this year only had 3 fewer wins. So going into their first matchup, the Bulls were clear favorites to win. But in the rematch in 1998, it seemed as if Utah had a good shot at winning. The Bulls were falling off a little, and Jordan was getting older. It was the last year before his retirement number 2 that is, and the last year for this Bulls team. But the Bulls team still had their head in the game and proved to be hard to beat. Both teams were heavily reliant on their star players. In Game 6, Michael Jordan put up the last shot of his career. It was a 2-pointer that gave the Bulls a 1-point lead with 5 seconds remaining. The Bulls won the game and the series. It was Michael Jordan and the gang's final championship. And unfortunately for the Jazz, they wouldn't win in the future or even make it to the finals again. In this case, the Jazz didn't come back to redeem themselves, and the series ended with the exact same result, Bulls in 6. The next finals rematch goes all the way back to 1985 between the Celtics and the Lakers. Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird. It was the 9th finals matchup between the Celtics and the Lakers, but only the second between these two rosters. The first of which, of course, was the year before. In 1984, the previous year, the Celtics were a 62-win team that the Lakers were unable to beat. The final series went to 7 games, and in the end, the championship was decided by 9 points. It was the 8th straight finals victory for the Celtics over the Lakers. For the rematch, things look promising for the Lakers. Last year, they had only lost the entire series by 9 points, while having won 8 fewer season games. This year, only 1 season win split the two teams. The Celtics took Game 1 by scoring 148 points, but the Lakers took 4 of the next 5 to win the championship, including a 136-point game in Game 3. Magic averaged 18 points, 7 rebounds, and 14 assists in the series, but Kareem took the Finals MVP with 26 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists at age 37. After a disappointing loss the previous year, the Lakers came back to win it all. The final finals rematch since 1980 was in 1983 between the Lakers and the 76ers. This time, the Lakers were the defending champions. They had won the series in 6 games the previous year. In that series, they had a strong group of players, including Magic Johnson, who came 2 assists short of averaging a triple-double. Julius Erving was on the 76ers and had a strong series himself, but in the end fell short. But for the rematch, there was one key difference. The 76ers now had Moses Malone on their team, which helped them win an additional 7 season games. They now had a better season record than the Lakers, but more importantly, they had someone who could stop Kareem. In the finals, Magic again came close to averaging a triple-double, but it wasn't nearly enough. Moses Malone averaged 26 points and 18 rebounds, while effectively containing Kareem defensively. Moses proved to be the difference and was the winner of the Finals MVP. After a disappointing loss the previous year, the 76ers came back to win it all. I would be incomplete if I didn't mention that there were 8 finals rematches before 1980. Seattle against Washington in 1979, Los Angeles against New York in 1973, Los Angeles against Boston in 1969, Los Angeles against Boston in 1966, Los Angeles against Boston in 1963, St. Louis against Boston in 1961, St. Louis against Boston in 1958, and Minneapolis against New York in 1953. Going back to the post-1980 rematches, I would expect the winner of the first matchup to repeat and win the rematch. After all, it's the same 2 teams facing each other only 1 year apart, and typically really good teams don't change much between years. If they do, it's usually for the worst, and in that case, there wouldn't be a finals rematch. I would think that if a team is proven to be better 1 year, it shouldn't be too difficult to do the same the next year. But this reasoning doesn't seem to hold up. In the 5 rematches we looked at, the same team only repeated 1 time. It was between the Bulls and Jazz in 1998. In all the others, the 2 teams split the victories. In 1983, the 76ers had their redemption. In 1985, the Lakers had their redemption. In 2014, the Spurs had their redemption. And in 2016, the Cavaliers had theirs. I'm also a little shocked that in 37 years, a rematch has only occurred 5 times. In the era before 1980, they were much more common, but we have to remember that there were less teams during that era, which made rematches much more likely. In the recent era, there were many occasions when the same team repeated appearances in one conference, but the other conference was different. I suppose with the number of teams that are now in the league, a lot of things have to come together to see a rematch. And this year, we're actually lucky enough to see the 3rd straight matchup between Cleveland and Golden State. Let me know in the comments any thoughts you have on any of these rematches.